Welcome to Transportation Connects Us, the podcast that addresses Wisconsin transportation topics.
Hi, I'm John DeRivers, Social Media Manager for the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. Welcome to this edition of Transportation Connects Us. Today we're discussing the WisDOT Tribal Affairs Program, an important initiative here at the department where we work with the 11 federally recognized tribal governments in Wisconsin on tribal relations and transportation-related issues affecting tribal communities. A little background information for you. The United States government has a unique legal relationship with federally recognized tribal governments as set forth in the Constitution, treaties, statutes, and court decisions. WisDOT has a responsibility and is committed to this unique government-to-government relationship that respects tribal sovereignty and self-determination. Now, joining me for today's discussion are Celeste Peterson, WisDOT Tribal Affairs Project Manager and Lac du Flambeau Tribal Member. Celeste, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We have Colin Price, Tribal Relations Consultant and Ho-Chunk Nation Member. Colin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Nice to be here.
And Daniel Webster, HR Business Partner and Oneida Nation Member. Daniel, welcome.
Thanks, John.
Thank you all for being here today. Let's start by defining for our listeners what the WisDOT Tribal Affairs Program is and why it's so important for the agency and the tribes to be working in partnership with one another. Celeste, can you get us started on that topic?
Yeah, the program was started based on the governor's executive order number 39 in February of 2004. WisDOT took that direction seriously and was the first to create a tribal affairs program based on the executive order. Gwen Carr was the first statewide liaison, and she worked with the governor's and secretary's office to create this program. And we have a partnership agreement between all of the 11 tribes, federal highways, and Bureau of Indian Affairs. And that was signed last year, end of September. And that was the third edition of the partnership agreement between them, which was first established in 2005. Also in partnership with the tribes, we've done some cultural awareness training within the department. The tribes also manage 7 of our programs, 2 trans programs, a tribal labor advisory committee program, and an InterTribal task force, and a National Summer Transportation Institute. There's 2 of those programs and 2 trans programs.
Okay, it sounds like WisDOT was sort of a leader when it came to coming up with a tribal affairs program. You talked about so many of the initiatives. Is the real benefit here? It's sort of a face-to-face between the department and the tribal governments, and the tribal governments really have a voice in transportation issues as it relates to them.
Yes. We've worked with tribes in developing safety reports for each of the tribes. They've also been in development of some of our policies, the Chapter 26 FDM, and then also the ITTF program and TLAC program.
Colin, Daniel, from your perspectives, can you touch on a little bit about why a partnership like this between a state agency and the tribal governments, why that's so important?
I think that it gives tribes the opportunity to become involved with the decision-making process, which is always very important. My perspective is a little bit different. As a contractor, that's where my role comes in at. But again, the cultural awareness training, it's huge throughout the industry, and it gives a lot of people outside of tribal government the opportunity to learn a little bit more and to help, increase opportunities and visibility throughout the industry with that population.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, I think it's really special for a number of reasons. But overall, there's so many moving parts to this, whether it's the contractors, whether it's the labor offices within each particular tribe, and even the outreach to the tribal communities. So without the work that everyone does every single day, none of this is possible. And it's really exciting to be part of because the opportunities are just endless. All you got to do is open up your paper or click online, and you'll see something having to do with road construction within the state of Wisconsin. And it's just so important in terms of tourism, jobs, all that stuff, and oftentimes goes overlooked. And so with this particular initiative, we're fortunate to be part of something that the leadership, both within WisDOT and the tribal communities, have all bought into and are continuing to work towards new solutions and fix some of the things that we can work on every day.
That's great. We had a lot of acronyms thrown at us on all these different programs that fall under the tribal affairs program here at WisDOT. But I think the bottom line is that it gives a voice, it gives a connection, and you said transportation and construction, it impacts everybody, and to have the tribal governments included in that conversation is so important. Let's move forward. Let's talk a little bit about some of the issues that Wisconsin tribes are facing today. Governor Evers' Executive Order 18 reaffirms the importance of breaking down barriers and energizing intergovernmental cooperation. So let's talk a bit about that. What are some of the key issues tribes are facing today, and how is this WisDOT Tribal Affairs program helping to address them?
One of the main issues is tribal communities have had a historically high rate of unemployment. There's a lot of data that suggests that minorities generally experience a disproportionate share of job losses during an economic downturn. I think that we've definitely seen that with the current state of gaming through tribal communities and with the COVID-19 pandemic, along with the disproportionate rate of high unemployment that exists. I think that's one of the main things that we're trying to address here through some of these initiatives with TLAC and the trans program, as well as ITTF.
Kind of piggybacking off what Dan said, what's really cool with the WisDOT initiative and programs is the desire to help. We regularly have meetings, now virtual, but we hear from tribal leaders and tribal labor departments expressing their desires and interests and needs for what is specific to each community. And that's something I think is very important, is that there are 11 tribes throughout the state, and they all have their unique differences. And we take that approach to finding solutions for each one, not just a blanket approach to all of them. And so I think that the solutions that we come up with might not work for other communities, but together we definitely try to pull off some new approaches, whether that's signage. I know is something that is important to some of the tribal leaders. They would like to see their tribal language visible on road signs throughout the community. And that's something that is not going to be easy to pull off, but there are people every day working towards that, collaborating with other states, other tribes that have done it, seeing what that looks like so that we could potentially see that coming to Wisconsin.
I think that WisDOT Tribal Affairs program is unique in that they have been in front of some of these issues. Other states have taken some of these initiatives and modeled after them to help the tribal communities in different states. I think that the initiatives that come out of the tribal affairs programs have been tremendous in certain communities in increasing their safety with some of the state highways, bringing in employment and training opportunities.
Once again, I think WisDOT showing some leadership when it comes to tribal relations. You mentioned other states modeling initiatives or behaviors after some of the things we've done here first. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, the first example would be the partnership agreement. And if you were to go on to our Tribal Affairs website, you can find more information about that. But that was one of the first ever that was created. The first one was an agreement between WisDOT, the state, and federal highways, and then all the 11 tribes. They've taken each of those initiatives from the partnership agreement and found ways to improve, the employment issues and providing training and funding for some of these resources really benefits the tribes.
Let me jump in here because we've mentioned a couple of these acronyms, and I think here's a chance for us to really kind of break down some of these programs. Daniel, you hit on it a little bit, and Celeste as well, with employment issues in the tribes, and you talked a bit about the Tribal Labor Advisory Committee, or TLAC. Can you again define that and why that is helpful?
Yeah, the Tribal Labor Advisory Committee was established in 2013 in lieu of some of the TARO that can't be enforced, which is a Native hiring preference. And so they worked with the tribes, the Department of Workforce Development, and WisDOT, and created the Tribal Labor Advisory Committee. They developed an implementation plan to offer training, trans programs in tribal communities, which also helps with training for construction jobs, such as flagging, heavy equipment, OSHA 30. So they've tried to get more Native workers on the highways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where I was going. A good initiative to increase employment opportunities for Native workers on our highways. We touched on another program, the TRANS program, Transportation Alliance for New Solutions. Daniel, I understand you were involved in that program, and I believe graduate from that program. Can you talk a bit about the program and why it's important?
I took the program in 2014. That year I had graduated with an associate's degree in business management, but the market was pretty competitive, and it was harder to find a good paying job at the time. I learned about the Trans Construction Training Program through some friends here in town and just decided to take a chance on it. At that time, I think it was a 6-week program and not an 8-week program. It was here in Green Bay, and my coordinator was a gentleman named Renard Morris. Renard ended up being a pretty influential person to not just me, but I would say throughout the industry over the last several years of us working together. Prior to Trans, I didn't think I thought too much about construction. In retrospect, I never really had any exposure to the industry. And I think that there's a general perception that all people do is shovel, and that is far from the truth. That misperception prevented me from really taking a look at the industry on my own. And I think that the narrative that exists in society is that we have to go to college to be successful. The construction industry is actually very advanced, and just like any other industry, we need people who can become supportive staff to our operational side of things. Getting through Trans was my foot in the door. Oftentimes, the most level entry position in the industry is either flagging, like Celeste speaks of, and sometimes you'll see people come in and they'll start to oil machinery, like on excavators and cranes and things like that. That's another level entry job in the industry. My first job was flagging, and I liked it. You know, I liked the exposure. I liked working outside, and it was enjoyable to me. Throughout that first season that I had worked, I just knew that if I showed up to work every day, did my job, and took it seriously, that I would have an opportunity to advance. I finished my first work season with some experience that I was able to gain on the job, and I was also offered another opportunity to do some traffic control work for a large traffic control company. That work took me all over. I worked up in Eau Claire on the Zoo interchange. Some of the bigger work that I did was here in Green Bay on the I-41 corridor expansion project. That was probably the work that I'm most proud of doing. This year marks my 7th successful construction season. So the program is very important. I think it still blows my mind to think about, you know, how you can commit to a 6-week course or an 8-week course over going to, you know, actually pursuing a degree, and you can kind of come out at the same level, right? I mean, we're making a family supportive wage, being able to be in a situation to take care of your family. And it is an alternative to going to college. You know, not everybody is suited to go to college. So I think that looking at the construction industry and apprenticeship programs are really important. And again, the narrative is that, you know, you have to go to college to be successful, which isn't always the case. So I think that to the extent that we can get better at promoting opportunities and marketing this stuff, I think that's what we should be focusing on.
I think you tell a great story of your personal experience, and maybe an example for others in your community. You went from not even thinking about construction or even considering a construction career to working on some of the state's biggest projects that we've seen over the past couple of years, the Zoo Interchange and I-41. Kind of a dramatic leap, and it all came from that program. Great. Well, we talked about some of these, some of the initiatives that we have in place to address some of the employment issues. I understand transportation also an issue when it comes to tribal governments. Can we talk a little bit about the InterTribal Task Force, the ITTF? How does that help address some of the transportation issues?
So ITTF is an intertribal task force that is made up of representatives from FHWA, BIA, all the 11 tribes, and then WisDOT. And in the past, some of the efforts that they have done are working on improving the safety in tribal communities. And one of those efforts was a development of a safety report, which took in crash data and all kinds of information from each of the communities and kind of developed a set of recommendations in safety improvements. And some of the tribes have been able to use that safety report and leverage funding through different grant programs. So the different initiatives that ITTF has done has been to work with the tribes and also provide a advocate for tribal communities within the transportation industry.
And Celeste, you touched on a lot of the programs a bit earlier in our conversation, but what are some of the other important initiatives that we have in place? I know GIS mapping, we talked about cultural awareness training and the importance of that. Is there anything else that we're not talking about that really deserves a mention here?
Another program that the Tribal Affairs works with in partnership with the tribal communities and FHWA is a program called NSTI, and that's the National Summer Transportation Institute. And this is one of the longest running programs. It's been running for over 20 years. And it's a summer program for middle school students, offering them learning opportunities. And not during a pandemic, they would go and explore EAA and Oshkosh and learn about the different transportation jobs that are available. So it's a really great program to get students interested in the transportation field. During the pandemic this summer, they were able to still offer that program online and in socially distanced, safe outdoor spaces. So it was great to see that program continue to move forward during COVID.
Absolutely, very important to keep the momentum of programs like that. We've talked quite a bit today about the partnership with WisDOT and the 11 federally recognized tribal governments here in Wisconsin. Why don't we wrap up the discussion this way? I want to talk about where does the program go from here? What is the future of the program? Are there any upcoming meetings, initiatives, anything that's important? And then maybe final thoughts from each of you on the program and kind of parting words to help wrap up the podcast here today. Daniel, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think that, as a group, we continue to generate ideals. And a lot of times, we act on those things. So if there isn't anything right now that we're not doing, we try to get better at that as we move forward. Like I sit at the table as a contractor. The tribe is there. The DOT is there. So we try to be innovative and adapt to everyone's needs, like we've talked about earlier, as far as all the tribes being different. I thought that was a good point as far as it not being a blanket, just process that covers everything, because there's a lot more resources that might exist here in Oneida than in LCO or other places in different communities. So we try our best to make sure that we're hitting those areas and again, generating good ideas that make sense for us to move stuff forward.
Okay, Colin, go ahead.
I definitely think the future looks to innovation. I think it focuses on leadership, being willing to do new things like we always do, and also trying to get in front of younger people, as well as some of the people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and even 50s who may be looking for a career change as we're facing these crazy 2020. But overall, I think it's optimistic. I think there's a lot of opportunities, and I definitely see the collaboration continuing, and we'll see more Native Americans on construction sites through the years.
Okay, thank you, Colin. And Celeste, we'll go to you here as the project manager. Let's wrap up the conversation. Where are we moving forward with the program, and any parting words for our audience?
We're always looking to improve our partnership, even within our department and tribes and other entities. And we, every day, Sandy and I are working on something that will help our partners, the tribes, the stakeholders that are also wanting to improve the tribal government to government relationship. And we like to expand and make our program even better than it already is.
Excellent. I think that's a good place to leave the conversation. Celeste, Daniel, Colin, thank you all for the great discussion today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. If you'd like to learn more about the WisDOT Tribal Affairs program, head over to our website at wisconsindot.gov/tribal affairs. That ends this episode of Transportation Connects Us. Be sure to download and subscribe to our podcast to stay informed on transportation topics and issues across Wisconsin.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Transportation Connects Us.